We reached this barrier where the machine gun was set up behind cover. As I climbed over it, I saw one of the enemy gunners lying in a ditch. He was badly wounded but still alive. He started trying to swing his weapon toward me, and I immediately switched my rifle to full auto. I was expecting a burst of fire, but when I pulled the trigger, only a single round came out. It caught me off guard. I missed him completely. I glanced down and realized the bolt was locked back. I was out, waiting on a fresh magazine. Meanwhile, he was still trying to bring his weapon around. I knew I didn't have time to reload the usual way, so instead, I pulled out my bayonet and rushed him. I drove it into his chest, but the first strike didn't go in like I expected. It hit bone, his chest plate, and stopped. For a second, I remember thinking, what is going on? Is this guy not going down? But I kept going and finished it. Being that close to him, it was something I'll never forget. When he took his last breath, it was right in my face. I could actually taste it. That moment stayed with me. Marine Corps boot camp is exactly what people say it is. They break you down, mentally, physically, and rebuild you. You learn discipline and how to respond without hesitation. Physically, I handled it pretty well. I had been athletic in high school, had good upper body strength, so the obstacle courses weren't too bad. Swimming wasn't an issue either. Overall, I made it through fine, though I was definitely relieved when it was over. Infantry training was a different story. Running up steep mountain fire breaks at Camp Pendleton with a full pack and rifle was brutal. Those coastal hills are no joke. There were times it was tough just to keep up, but I managed to stay with my unit. What I really hated, though, was guard duty. Standing out in some remote spot, freezing, watching over nothing. Still, I knew it was part of the job, so I did it. I was deployed to Vietnam in early January 1967 and stayed until the end of May 1968. When I first got there, I didn't even know exactly where I'd be assigned. They initially placed me at Chu Lai Air Base, where I worked security. We built bunkers out near the sand dunes by the South China Sea. At that point, it didn't feel like direct combat. We were behind perimeter defenses someone else had set up. There were occasional mortar attacks, but it didn't feel immediate, at least not yet. That changed when I joined an infantry unit. That's when it became real. Suddenly, I was in it, and I started asking myself what I was going to do now. Our missions were mostly patrols through the jungle, moving out into the bush, searching for enemy forces. Sometimes it felt like we were putting ourselves out there just to draw fire so artillery or air support could be called in. At night, we'd set up ambushes, hoping to catch enemy movement. We also conducted large sweeps through areas, clearing them out or engaging when we made contact. At first, this was in the central southern regions. Later, we moved further north into more mountainous jungle terrain near Phu Loc. The objective there was to disrupt enemy operations, intercept movement, and wear them down. Everything escalated when the Tet Offensive began. After that, the fighting didn't let up. We couldn't break contact, it was constant. We just had to stay in it and fight. As for my role, I was assigned a rocket launcher. Early on, I was issued an M14 rifle, which I really liked. It fired a powerful 7.62 round, reliable, hard-hitting. You could drop it in the mud, pick it up, and it would still work. The downside was the weight, especially carrying large amounts of ammo. On top of that, I had to carry a rocket launcher system. The original one had to be assembled from parts, which wasn't ideal in jungle combat. You either carried it assembled and risked exposure, or assembled it under pressure. Eventually, we switched to law rockets, lightweight anti-tank weapons. Those were much better. You could extend them quickly, pop up the sights, and fire. I'd often carry several of those rockets myself, sometimes 4, along with my rifle, ammunition, food, water, and other gear. I ditched the gas mask early on. It was more trouble than it was worth. Sometimes other infantry guys would carry extra rockets for me, and I'd fire, reload, and keep going. My job was basically to provide heavy firepower, blow things up when needed. It was physically demanding, especially in the jungle and mountains. The rockets had a strong backblast, so you had to be careful when firing. You couldn't have anyone directly behind you. And once you fired, your position was exposed. You had to move immediately, because the enemy would return fire right where you had been. But when used properly, those rockets were incredibly effective. They could support infantry units under heavy pressure, especially during the Tet Offensive, when we were working to retake areas that had been overrun. That's when everything intensified, and we were constantly engaged, pushing forward and trying to take back control. We were going up against enemy forces dug into bunkers and fortified spots. We moved forward in short columns, advancing straight out in the open. You could see the flashes from their weapons before you even heard the shots. Then the rounds would zip past you, fast, close enough that you could almost feel them cutting the air. Men started going down. Some were hit and kept moving, others dropped where they stood. A few didn't make it at all. But there was no stopping. You had to keep pushing forward no matter what was happening around you. My role was to keep the pressure on. Anytime I spotted a muzzle flash, I'd fire a rocket in that direction, then another, and another. The goal was to support the assault so we wouldn't lose momentum. Getting pinned down was the worst thing that could happen. We had to stay aggressive and maintain fire superiority, and that's what I focused on. When it came to the Tet Offensive, we could sense something was building even before it fully hit. We had just taken control of a hill and were setting up defensive positions, laying down wire, digging trenches, putting up tents, and preparing for whatever was coming. We started running patrols from that position and were taking occasional mortar and rocket fire. We also had a number of intense firefights with moving enemy units, but they were short bursts, not constant. Then Tet began, and everything changed overnight. It became non-stop. The enemy was ready, positioned, and coming at us hard. At the time, I was at a firebase near Phu Loc. One night, a squad went out on patrol and never returned. That same night, we were hit heavily with rockets, mortars, and ground assaults. We even found bodies tangled in the perimeter wire. We were working alongside South Vietnamese forces at that position, and it was critical we held it. Losing that base could have meant losing control of Highway 1, which was vital for moving north to support the fighting in Hue. The next morning, we went out to find that missing squad. When we reached them, it was devastating. They were all dead, lying scattered across the street like broken pieces of wood. I remember seeing their blood flowing along the ground like water running through a gutter. It's an image that never leaves you. We didn't encounter any enemy there. They had already pulled back. So instead of a firefight, it turned into recovery. And that was just as hard in a different way. We had to gather our fallen friends ourselves. There was no helicopter support at first because of the weather, so we found a farm cart with old squeaky wheels and started loading their bodies onto it. We collected their weapons, their ammo, everything. It was slow, painful work, and it felt unreal. Eventually, we got them evacuated, though the details blur together now. After that, it didn't let up. We moved from one village to the next, retaking them one at a time. It became a cycle. Move in, fight, secure, then do it all over again. A lot of the time, there wasn't much direction. You just knew what needed to be done. You'd get dropped off near a tree line, look out across an open field, and see the enemy flag flying in the distance. That was all the information you needed. You knew you were about to move in and take it, and we did. We pushed forward, engaged, and fought it out. Some enemy fighters managed to escape, but most stood their ground. These weren't hit-and-run fighters like we'd seen before. These guys were there to fight, and they weren't backing off. After each engagement, you'd look back and see your own men down. Corpsmen would be moving between them, trying to stop bleeding, cutting away uniforms, doing whatever they could. Others would secure the area so we could bring in helicopters for evacuation. Then it was on to the next place. No time to process. No time to stop. During that time, we received some replacements. One of my closest friends rejoined us after being away on leave when everything kicked off. I tried to explain to him how different things had become, how intense it was now, but it didn't seem to fully register. It was like part of him was still somewhere else. Not long after, we moved out again. We passed through a village that was completely empty. That alone told us something wasn't right. Sure enough, they were waiting for us. As soon as we moved into the open, they opened fire. We reached a sugarcane field, and I told one of my guys to move over with Swanson to support him with rockets while I stayed on the other side. We looked at each other for a moment, just a quick, silent acknowledgement, and then moved forward. As we came out of that field, machine guns erupted. Swanson was hit immediately. My assistant gunner went down too, along with several others. It all happened in seconds. I dropped low, tried to throw a grenade, but it didn't go far enough. For a moment, I thought I might have just put myself in danger with it. Everything was chaos. Then I realized we were overshooting. The enemy wasn't far away. They were right in front of us. I could see their helmets clearly. At first, I thought they might be ours, but then I understood. They were North Vietnamese soldiers, fully geared, right there. I grabbed my rockets and fired at close range. I managed to take out a machine gun position and the man responsible for killing Swanson. But when I looked over and saw Swanson lying there, I couldn't move toward him. I just froze. Some of the guys began pulling the wounded and dead back. I remember telling them to be careful with him, not to let his head hit the rocks, even though I knew he was already gone. Something shifted in me at that moment. A kind of anger took over. I told myself I was going to get them. I looked down at my rifle and started loading magazines from the ammo I had. I even pulled off an ammo belt that was digging into my neck and used those rounds. But in the rush, I made a critical mistake. I didn't load the rifle. We moved up again and reached a barrier where a machine gun position had been set up. As I went over it, I saw one of their gunners lying in a ditch. He was badly wounded but still alive, still trying to turn his weapon toward me. I switched my rifle to full automatic and pulled the trigger, expecting a burst. Instead, only a single shot fired. I missed. I looked down and saw the bolt locked back. I was out of ammo in the chamber. There was no time to fix it. He was still bringing his weapon around, so I pulled my bayonet and charged him. I drove it into his chest, but it didn't go in at first. It hit bone and stopped. For a split second, I couldn't believe it, but I kept going and finished it. That moment, being that close, feeling the reality of it, it stays with you. Being that close to him was something I can't really put into words. When he took his last breath, it was right in my face. I could taste it. I remember thinking I could even tell what he had eaten. It was that real, that close. After that, I looked out across the field and something in me just snapped. I told myself, that's it. I reloaded and started going after them. I wasn't thinking clearly anymore. I just wanted to keep pushing forward, to keep fighting. At some point, I realized I had gone too far ahead. I had completely separated from my unit. They had actually started pulling everyone back because we had taken so many losses that we weren't effective anymore. But I didn't know that. I was out there alone. That's when it hit me. I thought, what am I doing? I need to get out of here before I get captured. The anger that had taken over started to fade, and I came back to my senses. I turned around and worked my way back, trying to follow the sounds of voices. When I finally heard my guys, it was a huge relief. I remember thinking, thank God they didn't leave me out here. They started calling out to me, asking where I had been. Over there, they called me Luigi. It came from my middle name, Louis. An Italian-American sergeant gave me that nickname, and it stuck. Luigi, where the hell you been? Get in the truck. I didn't argue. I climbed in and we got out of there fast. After that, everything became a bit of a blur. They moved us to a CB base so we could regroup. Those guys treated us well. They had real food, hot meals, and a place to sleep. They even gave us their own bunks. We had been out in the bush for weeks with nothing but rations and whatever we could heat up ourselves, so that felt like a different world. But once things slowed down, the reality started to hit me. I thought about the guys we lost, Swanson, my assistant gunner, and the others. I knew their bodies had probably been recovered by then. That part weighed heavy. Not long after, we moved through Phu Air Base and then got flown into Hue City. On the way in, the helicopter I was on got hit hard. We were taking fire, and some of the rounds came straight through the aircraft. I got hit too, but the bullet didn't go through me. It went through my canteen instead. The impact knocked me down onto the floor of the chopper. I remember lying there thinking I had to get up because rounds were still coming through the floor. The co-pilot managed to keep control and limp the helicopter back to Phu Bai. Once we landed, they rushed the wounded to the hospital. They checked me out and couldn't believe I wasn't seriously injured. My gear had taken the hits, a canteen full of bullet holes and a round lodged in my flak jacket that could have easily hit my spine. They told me I was lucky and gave me a medical release. I caught a ride back to my unit, expecting to get right back into it. They told me they'd get me out there again, but then the weather turned bad. Heavy rain grounded the helicopters, so instead they assigned me to bunker watch again. So there I was, stuck on base while the battle for Hue was still going on. That was tough. I felt like I should have been out there with my guys. There was a lot of guilt in that, feeling like I wasn't doing my part. But looking back, it probably saved my life. I don't think I would have made it through if I had gone back into that fight. After the fighting in Hue ended around mid-March, I rejoined my unit. By then, I thought my time was up and I'd be heading home. I told them, "I've done my 13 months, I'm supposed to be leaving." But they told me I had to stay longer. They needed experienced guys to help train the new replacements coming in. So they had me teaching them how to use law rockets, showing them what to expect, trying to get them ready. Honestly, that was one of the hardest parts for me. They put me in the command post area, away from my unit, and I felt completely out of place. Everything I had been through, it felt like a wave had crashed over me and left me somewhere I didn't belong. And then I'd look at these new guys, barely any age on them, still with that fresh look on their faces. I couldn't bring myself to get close to them. I didn't want to know their names, their stories, or anything about their lives back home. In my mind, I kept thinking they weren't going to make it. It was a harsh way to look at it, but that's where my head was at. Eventually, my orders finally came through. They flew me from Phu Bai to Da Nang, and from there, I was sent on to Okinawa. As we were flying into Da Nang, the area was still under attack. You could see and feel it. Rockets were coming in, and the aircraft was weaving through the air trying to avoid getting hit. I remember sitting there thinking, if I make it off this ground, I'm never coming back to this place again. And for a long time, that's exactly how I felt. Years later, I finally did go back. That trip I took in November, it was a powerful experience. I had a lot of anxiety leading up to it. I wasn't sure how it would feel or what it would bring back. But in the end, I'm really glad I went. The group of veterans I traveled with, they were incredible men. We supported each other the whole way. We talked, shared stories, and helped each other carry things we had all been holding on to for years. Honestly, I don't think I would have been able to talk about all of this if I hadn't gone on that trip. For a long time, I kept it buried. After the war, those emotions didn't just disappear. They came out in other ways. I struggled with anger and ended up having a history of violent behavior for a while. Looking back, it almost feels like I became someone else over there. Luigi wasn't just a nickname. It turned into a second version of me. Luigi could do things that the person I used to be, Steve, probably couldn't. It's strange to explain, but even later in life, there were moments where I felt like I could call on that version of myself when I needed strength. It was like tapping into something that had been created during that time. When I first came back, I didn't really deal with anything. I was just drifting, riding around on a motorcycle, carrying a gun, drinking, looking for trouble. That was my reality for a while. Then everything changed when my girlfriend got pregnant. I knew what that meant. The way I was raised, you take responsibility. So we got married. I found a job with the Santa Barbara City Fire Department. I cleaned myself up, cut my hair, shaved, got disciplined again. It actually felt familiar, almost easy in a way because of my background. There were other veterans there too, including Marines from the Korean War. They took me in right away. They didn't care about anything else. They just saw me as one of their own. That meant a lot. They helped guide me, pushed me to get educated, and got me into fire science courses at the local college. I started learning more about fire behavior, equipment, hazardous materials, investigations. I even worked with the fire marshal doing inspections. That eventually led me to get interested in law. I spent time at the city attorney's office And from there, I transferred to UC Santa Barbara, went on to law school, and became an attorney. I built a new life. I remarried later on and started another family. Looking back, I can honestly say that it was other veterans who helped me get there. They understood me in a way no one else could. Most people were intimidated by me back then, but those guys stood by me and helped me find a path forward. When I think about my service, I feel a sense of pride. I did what I was asked to do. I didn't back down. I stood my post, carried out my duties, and stayed committed to my mission. Regardless of the politics surrounding the war, I believe my service was honorable. And the men I served alongside, they were the best, no question about it. As for sharing these experiences now, I think maybe it can help someone else. I don't know for sure, but if it does, then it's worth it. There are parts of my story that I'm not proud of. Some moments still sit heavy with me. But I'm talking about them now because they've come back to the surface after being buried for so long. Sometimes it doesn't even feel real, like it happened to someone else, like a distant dream. But it did happen. And I've come to accept that. I'm not telling these stories to boast or make myself out to be something special. That's not what this is about. I did what I believed was my duty. I took an oath, and I lived by it. I stood for my country and for the men beside me. And that, I can say with certainty, is something I'm proud of. This story is not just about war, but about survival, identity, and the long road back to being human again. It's about a young man who did what was asked of him in the most extreme circumstances, carrying both pride and pain for the rest of his life. The battlefield didn't just test his strength, it changed who he was, creating a version of himself that could endure what most cannot imagine. Yet, through loss, guilt, and years of struggle, he found a way to rebuild, guided by brotherhood and purpose. His journey shows that even after the darkest experiences, there is still a path forward. Sharing this story isn't about glory, but about truth, raw, honest, and human. And if it reaches someone who is fighting their own battle, then it serves a purpose greater than the war itself.